Man, so new year, new week, new season, and I always feel like with these new transitions that happen, sometimes there's so much anticipation and so much expectation for what happens in a transition moment, and then when we actually hit that moment, it wasn't as great as we thought it was going to be. And I don't know if you guys remember, but when I was 17, about to turn 18. Everything was going to change when I was 18. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a curfew anymore. I get to make my own rules. I'm an adult. I get to do whatever I want to do because I turned 18. But the reality is, when I turned 18, I still woke up in my mama's house. And I still woke up to a curfew. And nothing changed. Just because a day changed doesn't mean I became an adult. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when we first step into a relationship with Jesus, yeah, we know everything did change, but it doesn't always feel like everything changed because we just kind of got into something new and we're not really sure. We actually have to take action and respond if we're going to expect something to change. We can't just expect the hour of the day or the day of the year to dictate what kind of change is going to be brought into our life. And so, I think it's funny. I remember on, 1999, everyone was really afraid of Y2K. You guys remember, what I'm talking about, like Y2K? They were literally like infomercials selling us like blow up tents and everything. Like, you don't know, you gotta stock beans and rice and bottled water for, 20 years worth. So like we did that. And we had water and like beans and rice in the garage. And I was like, all right, I was 8 years old. So, or not, was I 8? No, 16 years ago. So I was 12 years old. And, I remember with my dad, we woke up on New Year's Day, 2000, January 1st, and we were told that potentially the computers might, when the clock rolls, I don't know what we thought, but we were told something would happen, like they might not work, it might blow up. Like, what a thought, like, why would we have ever thought that? So literally, my dad, I'm 12 years old, he's leading me into the garage, and we're tiptoeing for some reason to the computer to see if it's gonna like blow up, or like, I don't know why he's taking me with him if he thinks it's gonna blow up, but we go in there, and we turn it on, and nothing happened. It was exactly how it used to be, because then when you actually reflect on it, you're kind of like, why would anything change anyway? It's just another hour of the day. Like, the clock just moves on. It's not that big of a deal. But I think sometimes we can look at that when we walk into a new year. We're like, all right, new year, new season. And then we actually get to the new year and the new day, and nothing has changed. And, because it's actually not the new day that brings the change. And so I want to talk about this year as we look forward to it and what God's going to do in our life this year. And I just want us to have a posture where we are expecting God to do something great in our life, because it's from that, positioning, from that frame of mind that we actually start to reap the fruit in our life. And we see in this story right now, Joshua was a part of a generational transition. And in this story, when we just saw how they were crossing over the Jordan River, I want to take a look back into Joshua chapter 1, because this was a significant moment in his life when he was actually leading the people across the Jordan River into the promised land. It was a very significant moment, but if we don't go back to Joshua chapter 1, if we don't look back in his history, we actually won't realize why it's so significant. And I think it's interesting because if we don't understand how long other people have been wandering for, then it's going to be hard for us to understand why they're so excited when they've been delivered into freedom. And which is why, as a church, we have a culture of grace, because we don't know somebody else's journey and somebody else's story and how far they've came and how long they've wandered and how far they've walked just to encounter the presence of God and just to experience this freedom. So we give grace to everybody that is going through a difficult time. And so when we see in this story, we see how far Joshua has come. He's been wandering for 40 years under the leadership of Moses to a land that was promised to him. They were led out of Egypt. They were led out of slavery. They survived the torture. And then they wandered. And, I don't know about you, but I'm glad that I survived my past, but I don't want to be wandering for the next 40 years. And we see in Joshua chapter 1 where God is giving some inspiration to Joshua. And he's saying, be strong and courageous, for I have gone before you. I am with you. The same God that was with Moses, that was faithful to Moses, I am with you. He's inspiring Joshua in this moment, and he's reminding him of who he is and of his power. And then we go on and we see into chapter 2 of Joshua, we see how Joshua is now sending out spies. He's actually investigating the land that God has called him to go to. And I love this because Joshua sent out 2 spies to go and explore the land. And obviously he's learned something from his predecessor, Moses, because 40 years ago, Moses sent out 12 spies, and only 2 came back with a positive report, and the 10 came back with a bad report. And it was because of the 10 people leading everybody to believe the bad report. They were wandering for 40 years before they ever entered into the promised land. And I think oftentimes in transition, sometimes we need to shrink our circles to people who see their life and see this season through the eyes of faith and see what God is doing in our life. We don't need the 10 people who are going to tell us we're not good enough, that we don't have what it takes, that God isn't bigger than our problem, than our future, than what he's going to do this year. We need the 2 people that are getting ready to stand up next to us and say, you got everything that it takes. You are fearfully and wonderfully made for God. It says the steps of a righteous man are ordered. And if God's going to call us to something, he's going to get us through it. So we need to surround ourselves with people that are on this journey with us. We need honest feedback, but we need feedback through the eyes of faith. And so that's what we see in this story. Joshua was sending out 2 people. He said, hey, I want you to give me the truth, but I want you to see it through the eyes of faith. I don't care how big the problem is, because we know how big our God is, and he's called us to go into this promised land. And then we see here in Joshua chapter 3, I guess before that, it's interesting because before they're about to cross over the river, they're camping out. And, I think it's so interesting because if we camp out with the wrong people, oftentimes we never actually make it to the other side. And so in this season, we're actually talking about who are we camping out with? This doesn't mean we can't have friends, but who are we letting influence in our life? There are some friends that we need to be an influence to, and we need to not go out and be influenced by culture, but go out and instead influence culture and be leaders in this city and stand up for what we believe in. And so what we're talking about, we're not saying you can't go out and reach people, but we need to be careful who's speaking into and influencing our decisions. And we see in Joshua chapter 3, verse 5, where he's starting to talk to the people. He's starting to talk to his own people, and he's giving them some instruction here. And he's saying, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And I think this is amazing because we see first God was inspiring them. He was saying, hey, here's the promised land. Be strong, be courageous. And we see the next one. He's going out investigating the land, and they're researching where they're going. They're making sure they're counting the costs, because I think that faith is not foolishness. We don't just go take random risk. We actually hear from God, and we count the costs, and we move forward with all trust in God that he can get us through it. And so we saw that happen, and now he's like, all right, here we go. So he's talking to his team, and he's saying, consecrate yourselves, because for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And I think that sometimes we need to remind ourselves that God is for us, that he's going to do amazing things. It says, this is the day that the Lord has made. We don't have to wait till tomorrow for God to move and do something great in our life. He can do it tonight. He can do it in our hearts right now. And that's what this is about. We're saying, hey, guys, get ready for what God is about to do in your life in 2016, because it's going to be amazing. But if we're still focused on the things that we've lost, if we're still focused on the areas in our life that haven't been worked out yet, we might just miss what's before us. If we keep focusing on what's behind us, we might miss out on what's before us. And so I would love us in this moment and in this night that we actually begin to switch our heart around. We begin to remind ourselves that God has got something for us in 2016, and we're going to seize the opportunity. We're not just going to hear about it, know about it, memorize it. We're actually going to live it out and be an example of that in our life. And then in Joshua chapter 4, he says, we can't just hear the word. We actually need to take action on this, right? And so in Joshua chapter 4, he's giving them the instruction of what to do. And I got to give you some context here, because the generation that was led before Joshua, like we said, was Moses. And Moses had taken them out of slavery. You see, they survived in slavery for so long, but then Moses was sent to take them out of slavery. And so they were survivors. But for 40 years, they were wearing that trophy on their back. And sometimes we get so caught up in memorializing the thing that we got over that we're not focusing on where God is leading us to. And in this moment, I'm so grateful that Moses led them out of their slavery and that they survived it. But now it was time for Joshua to lead them into where they were going to settle and not just survive. They had survived. That's great. They were wandering. But now it's time to settle in the plan that God has for your life, for the thing that he's speaking to you about. I believe there are some people here that have come out of a lot of stuff. And we are so grateful that God has just saved us from some difficult situations, things we don't even know about. But let me not get it twisted that we don't want to stay in that place. We need to also keep our eyes on where God is moving and where God is going and where he's taking us. Because I believe that that is where, and that's what it's saying, that's where the promised land is. It's where God is leading us to go. Where we begin to reap the fruit of the years where we have been harvesting and we have been faithful. We begin to reap that fruit in our life in this year. I believe that's where we're going. And in Joshua chapter 3, it says, early in the morning, just verse 1 through 4. Sorry, I don't have them on the screen here. You just got to listen. So it is Joshua chapter 3, verse 1. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim. And I don't know if that's a curse word or a city, but my bad. No, I'm kidding. It says Shittim. And went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing. After these days, the officers went through the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. We just kind of talked about that a little bit, but what I get from when I'm reading this part of the story is that they just came out of a moment of significant loss. If we put this in perspective here, Moses, the man of God who wrote the 10 Commandments by instruction of God, who led them out of Egypt, who was faithful, who they saw God move time and time again in his life, he just passed away. And so in a time of grieving, we see is when God is calling people to go on to what is next. But how is that possible? Because he's grieving the loss of their leader. Now they have a new leader. And that's why he's saying in this moment, it's not about the person that they're following, because the Ark of the Covenant, as we know, represents the presence of God. It was believed that the presence of God was physically held in the Ark of the Covenant. And so these priests were carrying the Ark of the Covenant across. And instead of the people putting their eyes onto some person, they were to keep their focus onto where the presence of God was going. And as we see in this story, Moses, who had passed, clearly had the heart and the affection of the people, and it would have been easy for them to let their focus and their heart reflect on the thing that they lost. But it is why in this moment God is commanding them to put their focus and their eyes onto where the Ark of the Covenant is going, where the presence of God is going, because that is where he's leading us to. When we need direction, we need to seek our time with God. We need to set some time apart for God to move in our own heart. And we can't just be, distracted by the things that we've lost in the previous season. We can learn from the previous season, but we can't keep our faith there. Our faith has to be a faith moving forward. Our faith is moving forward. We might look back and we might see where we've come from, but our faith is moving forward into the thing that God is calling us to, into the place that God is calling us to. For me, it's easy in this situation. Like there's so many people, probably even in this room, that you lost something significant in 2015. So moving into a new season and a new chapter is difficult because you might have lost a job, or you might have lost a relationship with somebody, or you might even have just lost sight of a dream that was in your heart. You might have lost someone close to you, but 2015 might have had some losses in there. And what I'm going to encourage us to do, and what I believe God has been speaking to me about this week, and with what he wanted us to do tonight, is that we're actually going to shift our focus away from the thing that we lost. We're going to learn from it. We're going to grieve it. That's okay. But we're going to keep our eyes fixated on Jesus. We're going to keep our eyes fixated on the presence of God, because where it is going is where God is calling us to. And if we're too distracted by the thing we lost, we might just miss the place God is calling us to go, the place that he promised us to go. There are promises, I believe, that God has declared over our life. Plans to prosper us, for blessing. And it is every situation in our life that has led us to where we are now. And if God has been faithful thus far, some of us just need to realize that we are still standing. And that might just be the miracle, is that, man, there was some hard times in 2015, but I'm still standing. There were some hard times, but I didn't break. I might have gotten shaken up, but I'm still here, and I'm ready for what's next. I'm ready, God, for what you have for me in my life. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves, we need to preach to ourselves. That's why I like reading stories of people that have taken significant ground, because we realize that there was nothing different about them and us. Like, they wanted to take ground that has never been taken before, just like God is calling us to take ground in this city that has not been taken yet before. But it's going to require a level of faith inside of us that we are expecting God to do a miracle in our life. We are expecting God to move in our life. When we go through a difficult time, God, what are you showing me through this season, through this situation, that I can take with me into the next? Because in this season was far before Joshua ever led the team to circle Jericho and defeat Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. But let me tell you, if they couldn't cross the Jordan, they could never take Jericho. And we see in this story, this was not the last battle that he was going to fight. There were many more battles ahead of him. But it was the faithfulness in this season that led him to the next. And my encouragement and my prayer over this house tonight is that we would not be discouraged, that we would shift our perspective, we would shake it off, we would keep our eyes on what God is doing in this city, in our hearts, in our life. We begin to circle ourselves up with friends in a community of faith that reminds each other of who we are, that we are not what we used to be, that we can be all that God has called us to be. You know, we don't always know what the next season might hold, but we certainly know who holds the next season. We don't know what the next chapter of our life will look like, but we know the author of our life. The Bible says he's the author and the finisher of our faith. What he is faithful to start in you, he will be faithful to complete. And that's what I believe God is speaking to us as we move into this year, that we are going to take some territory that has not been taken before. And it's going to happen in your life, in your relationships, in your jobs, in your finances. And we are going to see God move. And we're going to look back at this point next year and be like, God, thank you for 2016. I'm ready for what's ahead. And you know what? This isn't going to be a year without challenges. Oh, we'll have some challenges. But we will have a God who's ready to fight those with us, who's going to give us the strength to handle anything. And he was faithful with the little last year. He's going to trust us with so much more this year. You know, in Joshua 4:10, we just talked about this too. It says, now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. You know, I just want to read that first part one more time. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan. And it's so significant to me because what essentially is happening, I know I'm just reading pieces of the story here, but the Ark of the Covenant was to lead, and the priests who were carrying it were going to walk out into the middle of the Jordan, and as they did that, the waters would part and create room for all of the people to cross this river. And so they had to walk out into the middle, and it just says, while they remained standing in the middle of Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people. And sometimes, just like we said, still standing is an act of our faithfulness to what God is calling us to do. And sometimes we got to stay standing in the middle of a hard time, in the middle of a storm, so that God can do what he's been wanting to do in our life. They had to stay standing in the middle for quite some time to let thousands of people, tens of thousands of people cross. And at any time, those waters could have collapsed on them. But they stayed there, trusting God in the middle. And that's what I'm going to challenge us to do as well, is that you might be in the middle of a difficult time. You might be in the middle of something that is truly heartbreaking, truly affecting your level of faith, truly driving you crazy. But my encouragement to you is that let's trust God in the middle of our situation. That he's with us before we go, he's with us in the middle of our situation, and he will be waiting for us right on the other side as well. And if you're going through something, be encouraged tonight that God hears your prayers in the middle of this situation. I don't know what it is, but he hears the cries of your heart. It's not too small for him, and it's not too big for him. But my encouragement is that we look back on this moment and say, hey, we were still standing even when it was in the middle of a tough situation, because I'm going to be ready for what God has for us right on the other side. And in Joshua chapter 4, verse 1, going back just a little bit, It says, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and you carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men, and he appointed them from Israel, one from each tribe, and he said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your child asks you, what did these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. What I love about this, man, I love the Bible because it just paints such a clear picture of how we need to move into this next year. And I'm not just going to be content with getting through 2015. Sometimes it feels like, man, I just got through this year. I just made it through. But what are we going to do this year? Just try to make it through again? Is that the goal? We just want to make it through? No. They just crossed the other side of the Jordan River that had taken them so much faith, so much effort, so much time. They just crossed, and now God is saying to go back into the middle and pick up 12 stones from the bottom of the Jordan River and bring them with you so that your children will ask you, what are these stones for? And you will let them know that it was when God proved himself faithful in the middle of the Jordan River. And how many times, when we look back on 2015, let's not just look back and we just made it through 2016. I don't want to make it through 2015 empty-handed. I want to come with something that I'm going to take from January of last year, from February of last year. God, I got perspective in February. I got some wisdom in March. God, I got a new understanding of who you are in my life. Let's go back and let's take something that we have learned with us from last year so that it propels our faith to a new level this year, so that it reminds us of his faithfulness. When we were in that season, he was faithful to get us here. When we hit the next battle, he's going to be even more faithful to get us through. And we have a memorial to remind us of his faithfulness. And it symbolizes go back into the middle of the Jordan, because it's go back into that thing that could have killed you, that could have taken you out. Go back into that situation and bring a stone with you to remember God's faithfulness even in your darkest day, even in the most troubling situation. Bring home a memorial of his faithfulness in that season. And that memorial could be that, hey, I'm still standing. In every situation, there is something that we can take away with a new perspective, because otherwise we enter 2016 the same way we entered 2015. And so I believe that God is calling us to bigger things, to greater things. That this year we're going to have some bigger challenges because we're going to have some bigger victories. And a big victory is going to take all of us fighting together for each other to knock these walls down, to enter into where God is calling us to go. There might be some difficulty, but we've got each other. We've got each other to have our back. And we've got a God who said, be strong and courageous, for I will be with you. And so we need to go into this new season remembering what God has already done in our life. And I just wanted to close before we really close this. I wanted to share a quick story and even show you a 2-minute video. And this last year, I had about 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet a guy named Josue La Jeunesse, who was 19. He's lived in the U.S. now 18 years, but he grew up in a small area in Haiti where they had no access to clean water. And some of you guys know that I have spent the last 7 years of my life leading an organization called generosity.org, and we build water wells around the world. And by the grace of God and the generosity of thousands of people, we've now been able to fund over 750 water projects in 19 nations and see over 400,000 people with clean water, which is pretty incredible. And I never take it for granted. And it's never just a statistic, because I'm reminded by people like Josue, who I'm about to share with you right now. And he grew up in this small town, and everyone had kind of turned him down to get clean water. And it's been a dream of his family. They would walk 2 miles up to the top of this mountain to a spring, but he's seen literally his family members fall down and break arms and legs, and even a couple of them had passed from it. And the only other option was a nearby source that was contaminated. So either way, it was just a bad situation. And his father had a dream. He said, son, one day we're going to have clean water here. We're going to do whatever it takes. And they were so diligent, but the government shut them down because it was a $35,000 project and so expensive. And so I heard his story, in 2009 through a documentary that was made about janitors, and it was about finding wisdom in the most unlikely places. And it was telling his story, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's like a hero. He's in his 30s now. He works as a janitor at Princeton, and you know, he sends half his money home to his family to help them in Haiti, and I want to help them get clean water. So I came up to this guy, and after the film was being shown, he was there doing a Q&A, and we hit it off, and I met the director of it, and one thing led to the next. And then we decided, hey, you know what, we've never done a project at that point in 2009 in Haiti, but we're gonna do this as our first one. We're gonna figure out a way to help Josue get water there. And so in 2010, we started getting ready to go and just kind of film some B-roll. It was like, oh, this would be a cool story just to show people. And we started rolling cameras, and little did we know that in January of 2010, the largest natural disaster in the Western Hemisphere would happen to this country of Haiti that we went to. And more than 250,000 people died in a span of 48 hours. And Josue remembers it like it was yesterday. I mean, he lost 11 family members that were cousins and sisters and brothers and people that still live there. He lost these people out of his life. And I remember seeing his face, and he was grieving the loss of these people, and he was even concerned about his daughter, because even though she lived with him in the U.S., she happened to be in Haiti that week visiting family, and didn't hear from her for 3 days because all cell was cut out. And finally, he heard that she was still alive, and he met her at the airport with these flowers. It was amazing. And we went back, but it was because of this earthquake that put Haiti on the map in a whole new way, and it gave him this platform at Princeton University that he never thought he'd have. And he was on this panel and invited me to be a part of it. It was Haiti Awareness Week there, and we shared about the need for water and a lot of other things in Haiti. And people said, they raised their hand like, Josue, there's hundreds of people in there, and there's students, and they're like, man, we've always seen you in the lobbies and the hallways, and we didn't know what you did, you know, your whole story, and we thought you were so amazing. But this is like inspiring to me. Like, I didn't know you came from this community without water, and it's not okay, and we're gonna help you. We wanna raise money. And so, long story short, 6 months later, the students have been throwing fundraisers and concerts and events on campus and sacrificing meals and rallying their friends. And by the end of this 6 months, more than $35,000 was raised to help Josue get a clean water project in Haiti. And we went back and we kind of filmed this whole story over 2 years and ended up releasing it as a documentary film because we wanted people to see how change starts and how it happens in one community, and how it starts with a dream and it's followed up with action, and how people will get behind it. And we released this film. We started screening it at universities and campuses all over the country. And pretty soon, we had raised over $250,000 because of this film, and had funded another 30 or 40 water projects in Haiti because of his story. And I'm reminded in this moment of how what the enemy has intended for evil, God can turn it around and use it for good. And we see in a story where somebody lost family members, where a nation lost hundreds of thousands. Terrible situation. But through that brokenness, there's a little light that shines. And that's, I believe, the grace of God, where now hundreds of thousands of people have received clean water in this country that never did, because of one man standing up and not giving up when difficult times came, but shaking it off and trusting God. What are you using the situation for in my life? How can I respond to your presence when it calls, God? And I just want to show this story because CNN found this story and decided that they wanted to air it on last year in January, the 5-year anniversary of the Haiti earthquake. And they wanted to show it because they wanted it to be an example of what is possible, and not just the negative images coming out of Haiti, but the beautiful images coming out of Haiti, and the inspiration and the change and the triumph. And so I just want to share this quick 2-minute video with you really quick.
5 years after an earthquake devastated Haiti, Josue La Jeunesse is back home. But this is a homecoming unlike any other. Here in the village where he was born, La Suisse, Haiti, Josue is a hero.
Okay.
You're like a celebrity here.
I'm a server for them, to save them.
Growing up here, there was no easy access to clean water. Until just a few years ago, villagers had to make this dangerous 3-hour trek up and down this mountain to a fresh spring. Those who couldn't climb the mountain drank the water from the river, the same river used for laundry, bathing, and by livestock. Many got sick.
When me and my brother was growing up, I said, Chris Meadow, what do you think? What do you think we can do?
How old were you when you said that?
Probably like 8, 10 years old.
So this has been a dream 40 years in the making.
Yeah.
That dream to bring clean water here to this village was finally realized.
Personally, if you don't, I can assure you.
Inspired by his dream, students at Princeton rallied around his cause.
Any help that you give to this cause, you will not.
With the help of generosity.org, they raised $38,000, enough to build a pipeline from the fresh spring on top of the mountain down to the village. All captured in a documentary fittingly named La Source.
It's like something like a miracle. Something you will never believe can be done. And then all of a sudden, manually, we don't have no pump.
Ça dit que l'eau ça moi senti que l'eau ça vient là comme si que c'est bon Dieu qui descend sous terre.
Nous capables de porter un paquet de changements et pour zone parce que normalement l'eau bien gardé et boire ça yo c'est à cause de l'eau qui fait nous arriver planter yo.
They can shower now, they can wash dishes now, they can cook with water now. Thousands now rely on this pipeline for clean water.
To me, Josue's story symbolizes the power of one person that can make a difference if they work hard, they rally people together. It's an example of how this country can grow and rebuild.
Josue may never think that he has done enough, but he's given his people much more than water.
The government cannot do everything. The Haitian, population need to take the responsibility also. Everybody, can help, can put hands together, all of us, because this is our country.
Come on. Josue is somebody who has truly inspired me year after year. We've stayed in touch. We've gone back to Haiti now. I've been there 15 times over the past 5 years, and we've done over 75 water projects, and we're planning to do a lot more and to start implementing there. And it started right after a major disaster in this nation. But I believe that God's gonna use that disaster to propel life like he's never done it before in the country of Haiti, and we get to be a part of that. And just like it's true for Josue, I believe it's true for you and I in whatever situation that we're facing, that God can use your situation in your moment right now to propel you into the place he's called you to go. And you will be blown away by the little storm you struggled in last year, how you're gonna be so grateful that you made it through it, so that when you look at where God is taking you and you go through a bigger battle, you're gonna be able to trust God even more because you knew he was faithful in this season. And we're gonna be able to just remind, hey, God, just like you were faithful in this little relationship situation, there might be some people that were contemplating taking their life last year or ending a relationship or doing something stupid, but God just saved you from that. And I believe that in this year, we're gonna see blessing after blessing. We're gonna walk into freedom like we've never experienced it. People are gonna let go of some addictions that have been holding them back because we are expecting God to show up in our life. We're gonna see some people in our life get healed. We're gonna see ourselves get healed. We're gonna get some wisdom and some perspective and some vision for our life because we can count on the God who is calling us forward. We're gonna keep our eyes on the presence of God. Where it goes, we're following. And that's why I love cut to 2,000 years after this when Jesus dies on a cross and God took human form and said, I'm gonna pay the price for your own mistakes just in case you choose to follow me, just in case you wanna respond and you wanna have that freedom. It doesn't have to be contained in the Ark of the Covenant. We don't have to turn our back to the glory of God because Jesus is the glory of God. Jesus came so that we may have life. So the Bible says we are to be a city on a hill and our light will not run out. And this year in 2016, my prayer is that our light would shine brighter than any year that has gone before us. That in this season, people would remember who we are, that they would take notice of your life. What is it about you? What is it about you that's just in keeping you going? That you have a good attitude even in difficult situations. That you might lose something close to you, but it can't take your joy. That you might get attacked by something, but it can't take your happiness because you know you are secure on who God is calling you to be. And in this moment, if we are ready, as the worship team can come on back up here and I'm just gonna invite us, if we're ready to take 2016 by storm and we're ready to put God first in our life and in this situation. And If we're honest with ourselves, we didn't get it all right in 2015, but that's okay because we learned something from it. And we're still standing, and God can still use us. As a matter of fact, he will use those things that tried to take you back. He will use those to propel you forward. And if you want to be a part of this year, I just want to invite you to stand up with me on the count of 3. And we're going to go back into worship together. But just when you're standing up, I want you to shake off 2015. And you can look at 2015 and just say, hello from the other side, from 2016. From where we are now. I love you 2015, but I'm going 2016 because this is where God's calling me to go. And if that's you, on the count of 3, let's stand up. Let's shake off 2015. Let's be ready for what God might have for us. 1, 2, 3. Come on, let's give God a shout of praise in this place. Let's thank God for where he saved us from. Let's thank God for where he's taking us to the place that God has for us.